We begin tonight with the frightening moments in South Florida today. The powerful earthquake, they felt it in Miami, a 7.7 magnitude quake erupting along the same fault line that's affected Puerto Rico in recent weeks. The epicenter between Cuba and Jamaica, and you can see the school children here in Kingston, Jamaica, hiding under their desks. In Miami, workers evacuated from downtown high-rises, gathering in parking lots until they could be sure that the buildings were safe. There was a tsunami warning in the region for a time, and the concern tonight, that same fault line that's already been active. ABC's Victor Akendo leads us off from Miami.
Tonight, people evacuating from buildings in Miami as a massive 7.7 magnitude earthquake in the Caribbean rattles parts of the city.
The alarm started sounding and they were told us to go downstairs to the stairs.
We thought it was a bombing, we thought it was a shooting, we didn't know what it was.
The earthquake's epicenter more than 400 miles away off the coast of Jamaica and Cuba. School children hiding under desks in Jamaica, 77 miles from the epicenter. Others evacuated in Kingston.
Big earthquake going on, look at this.
In nearby Cayman Islands, the pool water seen rattling. The last month has been an extremely active period for earthquakes in the Caribbean. Today's quake comes just 2 weeks after a series of devastating earthquakes in Puerto Rico, which sits along the same tectonic plates.
Fire crews are tonight scrambling to contain a number of bushfires that have hit emergency level right across the state. On the south coast, the fire fronts are creating their own thunderstorms, while the blaze descending on Canberra is now threatening towns in New South Wales.
Sunset came at midday along the Monaro Highway. The ominous orange glow spelling a major fire emergency, as the monster blaze devouring the ACT turned its sights on New South Wales.
Early this morning you could see the flames up on the furthest hill, up on Mount Clear, and then it's just been coming south ever since.
Fierce northwesterly winds fanning the Aurora Valley fire southeast away from Canberra. Micalago, Bumbalong and Bredbo all under attack, as embers rain down on the townships and villages, sparking spot fires.
It's just gone 12 o'clock and we're on the main highway between Micalago and Bredbo. This fire behind me is just moving at a lightning pace. It's come running down this paddock in the few minutes that we've been standing here. People around here, they're being told to clear out. Right now there are very real fears for people's homes.
We're expecting to see potential for more spot fires occurring to the east of that main fire front.
Many, though, decided to stay and fight.
Just an old broken down Toyota Hilux and a tank with a pump and some hose on the back.
Emergency crews throwing everything they had at it too. Some Bredbo locals leaving while they could, others staying, but worried about electricity.
If we lose power, we will lose the ability to draw water to actually defend the village.
In Canberra's southern suburbs, residents anxious, some choosing to head to evacuation centres.
I've been packed for days, and I finally convinced my husband to come here.
This fire, sparked by a defence helicopter, has burned more than 15% of the ACT, and it's now on the city's doorstep.
The fire is now 35,800 hectares in size. It does remain 2 kilometres from Tharwa and 7 kilometres from Banks.
Another nervous night ahead.
This is what a week of torrential rain has done to the people of Marawe. Their homes swept away, paddy fields and rice stalks destroyed. The few belongings people like Elisa have disappeared in the floodwaters. Now she just wants to survive.
I need food for my children and for me. My children don't have any clothes. We have nothing to wear. I've had to borrow this.
At least 16,000 people have been displaced by floods across 7 regions of Madagascar in recent days. Roads linking northwestern parts of the island to the rest of the country have been washed away. And that's making it difficult to get aid into the area.
If cries and screams couldn't help save a life, residents of Kanyamkago in Migori County could have saved one of their own who drowned in River Nyaria while trying to rescue a student who had been overwhelmed by the water.
Kuanzia jana saa 11
He slipped into the Solen River. but his rescuer was not as lucky.
Now what you can see today is the overflow of the rains from the other side. So you can never know at what point will the river will overflow.
Tens of thousands of people have been displaced. Minas Gerais state has been hit by torrential rain since Friday, and authorities have declared a state of emergency in dozens of towns, several of which have been devastated. 65 people have been reported injured in the flooding, but 2 remain missing.
São Paulo com vias fortes, ó. Carro capotado ali, carro ligado. Será que tem alguém dentro? Que isso, velho. Pô, eu nunca vi isso aqui no centro desse jeito, velho.
There's breaking news tonight on the coronavirus. The federal government has declared a public health emergency and is taking an historic step to try and contain the virus. U.S. citizens who flew from China are being quarantined. That is the first time that's happened in decades. Carter Evans is outside the military base in California, where nearly 200 people evacuated from China this week are being housed.
The Americans being housed at March Air Reserve Base during the first federal quarantine in 50 years will spend 14 days here.
Hija de mil. Mira, pobre. Hija de mil. De tagón.
A smash has claimed the life of a 27-year-old man on York Peninsula. Police now investigating if the wet weather contributed to the crash. It follows severe storms lashing most of South Australia, sparking flash flooding, and many now facing a huge clean-up.
In Port Lincoln, classrooms are transformed into swimming pools. St Joseph's Primary inundated, leaving staff with an enormous clean-up.
The smell is pretty terrible. There is mud everywhere.
The school forced to shut its doors until at least Tuesday, the council issuing a warning for contaminated floodwaters as it defended claims its new multi-million-dollar pumping station built to prevent flooding didn't work.
It moved around 5.5 million litres of water from that area, so it certainly was operating.
For farmers on the Lower Eyre Peninsula, the rain was a welcome sight.
Good for the environment, for the water table, the native vegetation, as well as, the animal life.
In the Flinders Ranges, Hookina Creek overflowed, spilling across roads.
But this is a lot of water.
The deluge soaking the state's northwest pastoral district too, Yadnapinna recording its wettest day in 82 years with 103 millimetres of rain.
The amount of moisture in the atmosphere was really quite incredible. Those storms were able to squeeze out a lot of that moisture, resulting in some very heavy falls.
In Adelaide, the parklands were awash. CBD roads were flooded. Roads were closed at Valley View. Across the state, the SES responded to more than 550 calls for help. Ella Duffy, 9 News.
First, we have an update on the spread of the deadly coronavirus. Now, a short time ago, the World Health Organization declared the outbreak an international public health emergency. The organization's Director General explains why they've taken this step.
The main reason for this declaration is not because of what is happening in China, but because of what is happening in other countries. Our greatest concern is the potential for the virus to spread to countries with weaker health systems and which are ill prepared to deal with it.
Well, the virus has now spread mainly in China, with more than 8,000 confirmed infections there, at least 170 deaths. But it has touched many other parts of the world. And the number of coronavirus infections has just surpassed the number of infections in the SARS epidemic, which hit in the early 2000s.
The steps outlined in the Trump administration's public health emergency will include a temporary ban on foreign nationals who've traveled to China.
The risk of infection for Americans remains low. We are working to keep the risk low.
Officials in Santa Clara County announced they confirmed a 7th U.S. case of coronavirus, a man who recently traveled to Wuhan.
He has been self-isolating at home. He was seen in a local clinic and hospital, but was never sick enough to be hospitalized.
According to the CDC, even if a patient's initial tests are negative, they could still develop the illness because the test only works when the patients have symptoms. A new study also showed the virus can be transmitted by patients with no symptoms. A woman who traveled from Shanghai to Germany infected 7 other people while she was asymptomatic.
Maybe you can transmit it even earlier, maybe a couple of days before you become symptomatic, and it becomes a lot more difficult to control the spread of a virus.
The people in quarantine here could potentially have more company. Starting on Sunday, any U.S. citizen returning home from the Hubei province is now also subject to a 14-day quarantine. Another American evacuation flight is scheduled to depart Wuhan on Monday. Nora?
China's war against coronavirus is being waged around the country as it spreads to every province and territory. So far, the virus is winning, with the number of infections and deaths growing by the day. On the front line in Hubei province, where the outbreak is thought to have started, the challenge is made greater by a shortage of medical supplies.
With the full support from the party central committee, the state council and all the Chinese people, the shortage of medical supplies has eased to some degree. But protective suits, glasses and N95 masks are still in tight balance and have to be scheduled daily.
There's not enough medical personnel either, which the government is trying to address by sending thousands of extra doctors and nurses, both civilian and military, to Hubei. Much of the province is shut down as authorities try to contain the spread of the virus, but supermarkets remain open and the government says it's trying to maintain a steady supply of food at regular prices.
We can ensure sufficient supply for daily necessities, such as vegetables, lamb, beef, pork and eggs in supermarkets.
As foreign nationals are evacuated from the provincial capital Wuhan, China's government has started bringing stranded nationals home from overseas. The first charter flight arrived in Wuhan from Thailand, amid reports of Hubei residents being prevented from boarding commercial flights back to China. In Hong Kong, medical workers are threatening to strike next week unless the government does more to restrict the flow of travellers from the mainland. While some border crossings have closed, flights from Chinese cities are still operating. The latest official statistics show that on one day last week, almost 10,000 mainland Chinese residents flew into Hong Kong. It's that traffic that many people here want stopped. The government says existing measures to control the outbreak are working, and stopping the flow of people or goods isn't the answer. But critics say unless Hong Kong follows the lead of some other governments and closes its border with the mainland completely, the city could be about to see a big increase in infections. Wayne Hay, Al Jazeera, Hong Kong.
Let's speak to Scott Heidler, who is in Beijing. So, Scott, these U.S. travel restrictions, they're pretty significant. And what's the reaction to this?
Yeah, very significant. When you look at, what the WHO had been saying kind of through the week, and again, kind of reiterating that they don't think travel bans are the way to handle the spread of this virus. The Chinese government responded to America's move to ban non-citizens who don't have relatives that are citizens or who aren't close family members. So they said this is not a move of good faith. So obviously that was kind of a slight they felt by the American government to China here in the midst of this crisis. The American administration said it wasn't meant to do that, but they just feel as though they need to protect themselves. It's interesting. It comes at a time, we heard in Wayne's piece there that it's not just the evacuation of foreign citizens leaving Wuhan. China has a lot of citizens overseas that they need to try to help and take care of, and they're doing that flight in from Thailand. But also within China, too, there are charter flights because there are Chinese citizens who are tourists in the affected area. So they are also trying to get them out of the impacted area, obviously testing them first and then getting them to their homes. So it's a very big and difficult task to get everybody where they can be and where they should be and where they want to be. So this is kind of ongoing, not just from an international perspective, but also from an internal Chinese perspective.
So, Scott, what is the feeling like? I mean, this is the weekend. Normally, it would be a very, very busy weekend. Are people really just staying home?
Yeah, this should be, the Lunar New Year holiday would have ended technically on Thursday. Then that means that some people would have come back to work Friday, yesterday. Then we'd also see a lot more people arriving this weekend, Saturday, Sunday. And then everyone to go back to work on this delayed holiday, extended holiday on Monday. But we're hearing from the railway department here in China that 80% decline in passenger traffic on Friday and Saturday today. So obviously a lot of people are either postponing their return to Beijing or bigger cities from where they've been during this holiday with their families, or they're just staying put indefinitely. And that's what we're hearing. Right now, the government, the central government and its offices, its workers, they're saying essential workers will come back on Monday, but then anyone who's non-essential, they're delaying it at least another week for them to come back. You look at Apple, the American company, they have a lot of offices and a lot of operations here in China. They say that they have they've closed their shops and they're going to delay workers coming back into their offices at least for a week. That's something we're seeing a lot with private enterprises here. Now, you look at the economic impact of this, it's growing because you have these private enterprises who are deciding to stay shut. You've got a lot of factories in Hubei province, a lot of auto manufacturing in Hubei province. Those are all standing idle now while they try to figure out how to contain this virus, while they try to figure out how long they need to keep this lockdown in place. So the economic cost is mounting as well.
Okay. Scott Heidler with the latest from Beijing. Scott, thank you. Al Jazeera's Alexia Ryan is in Bangkok, where Thai officials provided an update on the virus there.
They have confirmed that the number of confirmed cases remains unchanged at 19, but the number of suspected cases here in Thailand has jumped to 344 from 280 on Friday. They're not saying that's because the virus is spreading much faster here. It's actually because they've widened the net. They're now looking at people who have arrived from cities outside of Wuhan, the epicenter of that outbreak, but also Thais who may have come into contact with Chinese tourists, for example, because China is the biggest source of foreign tourists for Thailand. There have been about 2 million people come through just in December and January since the outbreak began. So if you have a look at the map behind me, though, there has been a map made up to show the outbreak as it stands at the moment. That big red circle is Wuhan and China's Hubei province, as I said, the center of that outbreak. And down a little bit here, you can see the red flashing dot. That is Bangkok. And that's because Thailand has the second highest of cases, 19 outside of China. And also authorities here say Thailand remains the most at-risk country outside of China because of the number of people travelling back and forth. But that number, 19, is dwarfed by the number, if you move with me here, of 11,300. That's the number of global cases. Most of them, though, are in China.
Thank you. Mr. Farage for 4 minutes.
Thank you very much. So this is it, the final chapter, the end of the road. A 47-year political experiment that the British, frankly, have never been very happy with. My mother and father signed up to a common market, not to a political union, not to flags, anthems, presidents, and now you even want your own army. For me, it's been 27 years of campaigning and over 20 years here in this Parliament. I'm not particularly happy with the agreement we're being asked to vote on tonight, but Boris has been remarkably bold in the last few months, and Ms von der Leyen, he's made it clear, he's promised us there'll be no level playing field. And on that basis, I wish him every success in the next round of negotiations, I really do. But the most significant point is this. What happens at 11 p.m. this Friday, the 31st of January 2020, marks the point of no return. Once we've left, We are never coming back, and the rest, frankly, is detail. We're going, we will be gone. And that should be the summit of my own political ambitions. I walked in here, as I've said before, you all thought it was terribly funny. You stopped laughing in 2016. But my view has changed of Europe since I joined. In 2005, I saw the constitution that had been drafted by Giscard and others. I saw it rejected by the French in a referendum. I saw it rejected by the Dutch in a referendum. And I saw you in these institutions ignore them, bring it back as the Lisbon Treaty and boast you could ram it through without there being referendums. Well, the Irish did have a vote and did say no and were forced to vote again. You're very good at making people vote again, but what we've proved is the British are too big to bully, thank goodness. So I became an outright opponent of the entire European project. I want Brexit to start a debate across the rest of Europe. What do we want from Europe? If we want trade, friendship, cooperation, reciprocity, we don't need a European Commission. We don't need a European Court. We don't need these institutions and all of this power. And I can promise you, both in UKIP and indeed in the Brexit Party, we love Europe. We just hate the European Union. It's as simple as that. So I'm hoping this begins the end of this project. It's a bad project. It isn't just undemocratic, it's anti-democratic, and it puts in that front row. It gives people power without accountability. People who cannot be held to account by the electorate. And that is an unacceptable structure. Indeed, there's an historic battle going on now across the West, in Europe, America, and elsewhere. It is globalism against populism. And you may loathe populism, but I tell you a funny thing, it's becoming very popular. And it has great benefits. No more financial contributions, no more European Court of Justice, no more common fisheries policy, no more being talked down to, no more being bullied, no more Guy Verhofstadt. I mean, what's not to like? I know you're going to miss us. I know you want to ban our national flags, but we're going to wave you goodbye. And we'll look forward in the future to working with you as sovereign.
Britain has left the European Union 3 years and 7 months after Britons voted in a referendum to leave. The moment has officially happened. At 11 p.m. London time on Friday night, the UK exited the bloc. It's the first country to ever do so. On Wednesday, the European Parliament gave its final approval. The chamber then broke out into a rendition of Auld Lang Syne, a song of farewell. The process has exposed deep divides in the country. Prime Minister Boris Johnson now says his job will be to bring the country together.
Sixpence, is it? Do you think of Britain joining a common market?
Well, actually, I think it'll be a good thing.
We will give the British people a referendum with a very simple in or out choice: to stay in the European Union on these new terms or to come out altogether. The Cabinet agreed that the government's position will be to recommend that Britain remains in a reformed European Union.
We want our borders back, we want our passports back, we want our country back.
that the UK has voted to leave the European Union.
Brexit! The weather's changed with Brexit! How about that?
It is a historic moment, but for sure not a moment for hysterical reactions.
I love this country and I feel honoured to have served it. While Britain is leaving the European Union, it will not, it should not, and in my view it won't turn its back on Europe.
Following the referendum, we face a time of great national change. And I know, because we're Great Britain, that we will rise to the challenge. This is an historic moment from which there can be no turning back. We now begin the process of negotiating the new, deep and special partnership we want to form with Europe. We agreed that the government should call a general election to be held on the 8th of June.
The UK firmly agreed that Northern Ireland will maintain full alignment with EU internal market.
Stop Brexit!
I will shortly leave the job that it has been the honour of my life to hold. The second female Prime Minister, but certainly not the last. I do so with no ill will, but with enormous and enduring gratitude to have had the opportunity to serve the country I love.
On a more personal note, what I feel today is, frankly speaking, sadness.
I have mixed feelings today. I really regret that the United Kingdom is leaving the European Union.
It's time to take a decision out of the hands of politicians and trust the people to decide.
Unlike any other party standing at this election, we're going to get Brexit done. Because this election means that getting Brexit done is now the irrefutable, irresistible, unarguable decision of the British people.
I accept, regretfully, that he has a mandate for Brexit in England, but he has no mandate whatsoever to take Scotland out of the European Union.
our friendship with you and you can count on us as we know that we can count on you.
Hanno votato 683 deputati, favorevoli 621, contrari 49, astenuti 13.